Well, it's been 8 weeks since Governor Inslee's stay-at-home order went into effect, and it's starting to get old. I miss my friends. I miss my Zumba class. I miss going out to eat. I miss worshiping together and holding hands while we sing "Go Now in Peace." Having a lot of time on my hands does have some benefits, I suppose. Our yard looks better this spring than it has in a long time. I love to cook, so I'm enjoying opportunities to try more elaborate dishes and opportunities to use my ingenuity and pantry to create a meal out of almost nothing. And I have rediscovered my love of reading. Over the years, overscheduling, the availability of TVs, shows, and movies to download, required reading for graduate degrees, instant news and entertainment on my smartphone have shortened my attention span, I think. But in childhood and early adulthood, I could read for hours. I'd get a stack of 5 or 6 books from the library every couple of weeks, and often I'd end up going back for more before the 2 weeks were over. I have fond memories of walking to Weber Park Library with my mom, my little sister, and a red wagon full of library books ready to exchange when I was a child in Minneapolis. As I graduated from picture books to chapter books, the most satisfying were series that advanced in reading difficulty and character development with each book, like the Betsy, Casey, and Tib books that took 3 friends from childhood through college and romance. Like millions of readers, I also loved the Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Like Laura's family, my family moved around a lot as I was growing up. And like the adults in Laura and her future husband's lives, my relatives did a lot of hunting, fishing, and farming. Even the geography was similar, as my great-grandparents had settled in North Dakota and Minnesota in the 1800s. Because I lived in various types of housing growing up, houses, apartments, trailer homes, cottages, farmhouses, duplexes, I was especially interested in all the different types of dwellings, mostly constructed by Laura's father himself, that Laura lived in throughout her childhood. The first book begins in a log cabin in the woods. There were no houses, Laura wrote in Little House in the Big Woods. There were no roads. There were no people. When the family moved to Kansas, Pa built another little house. Pa built a house of logs from the trees in the nearby creek bottom, and when we moved into it, there was only a hole in the wall where the window was to be, and a quilt hung over the doorway to keep the weather out, Laura wrote in her autobiography, Pioneer Girl. Most intriguingly, when the family arrived on the banks of Plum Creek in Minnesota, Paul built a one-room dwelling dug from the earth in the side of a riverbank. As a child living under constantly changing circumstances, I was comforted by Pa's ability to create shelter for his family wherever they were, out of whatever he had on hand. Many of the children I read about and saw on television seemed to live in pristine upper middle class homes with attached garages and picket fences. I could relate much more easily to little Laura, who spent her life in one different structure after another, but always had a safe place to lay her head. My dad was handy. He fixed his own cars and did a lot of home maintenance, but I couldn't picture him building an entire house or a one-room dugout. How did Pa make all those dwelling places structurally sound? The dugout never fell in. The walls of the cabins remained upright, supporting their roofs. Laura Ingalls' father must have had some knowledge, either learned or instinctual, about building a structure that would remain standing. Pa didn't build in stone, but there must be some principle akin to the proper laying of stone that made his building sound. In the construction of a stone building, especially before modern architecture and engineering, it all started with the cornerstone. A cornerstone is one prepared and chosen for its exact 90-degree angles. As such, it is the basis for the construction of the whole building. Choosing the right cornerstone determines not only the aesthetics of the building, but its stability and longevity. In 1 Peter chapter 2, Jesus is described as both a living stone and a cornerstone, chosen and precious. The reference to the cornerstone is from Isaiah 28:16. Now listen to the word of Yahweh. I am laying a stone in Zion, a block of concrete, a precious cornerstone, a solid foundation. Those who put their trust in it will never be disappointed. During these turbulent times, it's hard to know what's more threatening: the potential impact of the coronavirus or the potential impact of millions of shuttered businesses and employees out of work. During the pandemic, as during the world wars, the Great Depression, devastating mass shootings and terrorist attacks, we need a cornerstone. We need justice as the measuring line and integrity as the plumb line, as Isaiah goes on to say. As people who integrate spirituality into our lives and pursue the good, we need a shelter in which to weather the sickness, financial hardship, fear, and uncertainty of these times. We can make our trust in God's promises the cornerstone of the structure of strength and hope we need to shelter in and survive. God doesn't promise that we will never experience hardship. God promises we are never alone. God doesn't promise that we will never fall sick and die. God promises that we are all part of a life force that beats in every living thing, down to single-cell organisms, and cannot be extinguished. Even a cataclysm like the Big Bang doesn't destroy life. It creates life. God gives us the resources, the mind and heart and spirit, overflowing abundance of the natural world, and the infinite riches of our inner world to survive seemingly insurmountable challenges. After the Ingalls family moved from the wilderness to the town of DeSmet, South Dakota, they suffered through the winter of 1880 to 81, one of the worst that South Dakota had ever seen. Blizzards raged from October to late April. Houses were completely covered and trains were trapped on the tracks. Food was scarce. There was no coal or wood to burn. So Laura and Pa spent hours twisting hay into fuel sticks to keep the family from freezing. As we continue to live in this reality of isolation, food shortages, unemployment, and illness, remember God's promises. One with all creation, we are never alone. We are among the infinity of life forms that will never be completely destroyed or extinguished. We have the God-given abilities and resources to cope with any threat or disaster, trusting life to persevere through any hardship. We too are living stones, chosen and precious. Remember that 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5 doesn't urge us to build bigger and stronger churches, fortresses, and refuges. Instead, we're called to let ourselves be built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices of compassion, inclusion, and gratitude. Because a strong and true cornerstone is the absolute grounding of a building, the word cornerstone has been used as a metaphor for something that is essential, indispensable, foundational. Astonishingly, the strongest cornerstone isn't physical. It's not an actual rock fashioned into the perfect shape to support the world. The cornerstone on which we can build our lives with trust and hope is intangible and yet solid. Amen.